Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're doing episode 8 of the Prime Minister Timeline, going through the years of 1935 to 1945, or 55, excuse me. So let's jump right in. So first in 1935 we have the race riots. Now these are typically, really it's more cops going on and beating on, black folk, of course. Of course, someone did die, as shown in that picture right there. And, of course, a riot broke out because of it. Note, the Works Progress Administration is never created. The National Labor Relations Act is never passed, and Social Security is never passed in the country under France. Or Joseph France. I think I need to be Prime Minister France. I think I need to, be clear. 1936, a major heat wave occurs, and the death toll is, of course, in the thousands. That was a pretty major thing that happened back in 36. The U.S. Maritime Commission is formed, as of course the tensions with other countries as World War II comes to light. And of course we also have the 1936 federal election, where Republicans and progressives both make gains, with Republicans under Prime Minister France now at 246 seats, which is a gain of 12, and progressives under Franklin Roosevelt is at 167 seats, a net gain of 3 from 4 years prior, and the Federalists under Alf Landon are now at 22 seats, a net loss of 15 seats because Landon, didn't campaign for his party, and Joseph France is re-elected Prime Minister with a majority government. Heading on to 1937, unemployment is high, as it does under the Great Depression, which is now being downgraded to a recession, and Prime Minister France does sign the Marijuana Tax Act. That is something that still occurs in this country, which is a marijuana import and export tax, pretty much. The Panay incident does occur, which is Japan attacking a U.S. gunboat near Panay. And of course, the recession of 37 to 38 does begin, downgrading the Great Depression down to a recession. Going on to 1938, Prime Minister France signs the Civil Aeronautics Act, of course, just preparations for the upcoming war against Japan and potentially Germany as well. The Civil Aeronautics Authority is formed due to this, and the recession of that's a 73, it's supposed to be 37 to 38 ends. And note, a minimum wage is not established in this country, at least not in these 2 decades. Going on to 1939, there is nothing noteworthy. In 1940, Prime Minister France signs the Naval Expansion Act, which is exactly what it is. It just expands the Navy. Prime Minister France also signs the Selective Training and Service Act of 1940, which is pretty much establishing the Selective Service. I almost said Secret Service, it's Selective Service. Prime Minister France also imposes a metal embargo on Japan in response to the Panay incident. We also have the 1940 federal election. Republicans do lose seats, and that's pretty much due to the slow response to Japan attacking a U.S. gunboat. So, U.S. folk are a lot more hawkish in this timeline. However, Wendell Wilkie still ends up becoming Prime Minister with the majority government, despite losing 7 seats. The progressives under Henry Wallace being a lot more left-wing than Roosevelt was, there at 172 seats, a net gain of 5. And the Federalists under John Sawyer, I believe John is his first name, John Sawyer, the governor of Ohio, they now have 24 seats, a net gain of 2, and Wendell Wilkie is elected Prime Minister with a majority government. Going on to 1941, Prime Minister Wilkie signs the Lend-Lease Law, which allows the export of military equipment to allies. And of course, Pearl Harbor is attacked in response to this, as well as the metal embargo, and thus Prime Minister Wendell Wilkie declares war on Japan, Germany, and the rest of the Axis powers, which I believe is either Italy or Hungary. It might be both. Prime Minister Wilkie also embargoes aviation fuel against said Axis powers. In 1942, there is nothing noteworthy. However, despite that, we do have a note. There is no internment of Asian Americans. Roosevelt did that. Wilkie would not have. Going on to 1943, these are race riots. This one is less, white folk beating on black folk, and more, there was just a lot of tension because of the military being there, and people were getting upset, and, black folk, of course, ended up, getting hurt because of said military intervention in Detroit. It was accidental, but a riot still broke out nonetheless. Going on to 1944, the only thing we have is the federal election that year, where Republicans end up losing even more seats. They lose 20 seats, now at 219 seats under Wilkie, and the progressives under Alben Barkley, now at 194 seats, they gain 22, and the Federalists under Harry Truman, now at 22 seats after they lost 2 seats. Wendell Wilkie is re-elected Prime Minister under a majority government. And now we go on to 1945. Prime Minister Wilkie does approve the use of atomic bombs against Japan, similar to Harry Truman, and this pretty much negates the end of World War II as we know it. You know, because how are you going to bounce back after that? Especially back in the 40s. Now, going on to 1946, the Philippines is granted independence by the United States under Wendell Wilkie, and he also signs the Atomic Energy Act of 1946, which establishes the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, because the whole development of atomic bombs, everything in atomic energy is a big deal back in the day. And we go on to race riots the race riots this year. Pretty much this one is your typical black or white folk beating on black folk, something that happens a lot during the late 40s, early 50s. However, there was no response back in the day, you know, outside of segregation being deemed unconstitutional. However, there will be a response later down the line. Going on to 1947, the Cold War officially begins. Despite this, I think the Cold War was going to happen no matter what after World War II. Prime Minister Wilkie would sign the National Security Act of 1947 because of this, which establishes the CIA, the Department of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not Chief of Staffs, Chiefs of Staff, and the National Security Council. Of course, race riots happen once again. Same thing, white folk beating on black folk, killing them. And of course, the Second Red Scare begins. Going on in 1948, Prime Minister Wilkie recognizes Israel, as a country. God, I can't speak this morning. And the 1948 federal election commences. As progressives finally get a prime minister, I believe it's either their first prime minister or the first prime minister in decades, because, you know, Republican and Federalist control and all that. Progressives under Earl Warren end up gaining 75 seats, 269 seats at the end of the day, and Republicans who nominated Thomas Dewey are now at 144 seats, or they lose 75 seats. I think instead of Truman holding up that picture of Dewey defeats Truman, it's Warren holding up that picture of Dewey beats Warren. I think that would be amazing. And the Federalists under William Alexander Julian, who was the treasurer, or the former treasurer under the Wilkie administration, ended up with 22 seats. They didn't lose. The Federalists didn't lose or gain anything, but you know, this is going to be a constant going forward, most likely. And Earl Warren is elected prime minister under a majority government. Note, the Marshall Plan is never passed, so $16 billion is never used in federal aid, and is instead used, you know, on domestic issues in the country. Going on to 1949, Prime Minister Warren signs the Housing Act of 1949. This is a much more liberal version of the one that was passed under Truman. Instead, there is still an increased role in federal housing. However, I don't want to say government controlled, however, they're government assisted, I guess you can say. And of course, race riots still occur. You know the deal. In 1950, Prime Minister Warren signs a resolution investigating organized crime. Of course, the whole race riots thing, you know, race is going to be a bigger issue now than when the civil rights movement started, because this is happening before that big movement started under Malcolm X and MLK Jr. The Korean War does begin. However, there is no development of the hydrogen bomb. That doesn't happen, at least not right now, because, you know, progressives would be against something like that. In 1951, now, this one is less of a riot and more of a massacre, and it's fucking disgusting what happens here. 4,000 white folk break into a home of a small black family and kill them. It's fucking disgusting. When I read this, it was just... Man, this makes you fucking, you know, like, think that, you know, shit could be worse. Going on in 1952, the occupation of Japan ends, because, you know, the United States occupied Japan after they bombed them. And in 1952, we do have the last federal election of this video, where progressives end up losing 22 seats. However, they're at 247 seats, which is enough for Warren to be reelected. And the Republicans under Nixon are now at 166 seats, which is a net gain of 22. And the Federalists under Adlai Stevenson II don't make any gains nor losses. They're still at 22 seats. Warren, as I said earlier, is reelected prime minister and still has his majority government. Heading into 1953, the Korean War ends. There is no victor, there is no loser. It's pretty much a stalemate, with Korea being split north and south. And in 1954, there is nothing noteworthy. Despite that, we do have a note, despite it being not noteworthy apparently, that segregation in schools is deemed unconstitutional, and Warren has a stronger response to it than Eisenhower did, immediately sending in the National Guard or the military. You choose. to, make sure that integration is, seamless. In 1955, there is nothing noteworthy or final year of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Chaotic One saying, peace.